And for more on this, Alan Burstein, visiting assistant professor, Israeli Institute Fellow Department of Political Science at University of California, is joining us live on the show. Welcome to the show, Mr. Burstein. I want to first start by asking you that Washington is pressing ahead for a 6-week truce in Gaza. But there are sticking points here. Number one, Israel says it will not end the war until Hamas is eradicated, while Hamas says it will not free all its hostages without a deal that ends the ongoing war. In such a scenario, how do you see the mediators bridging the gap between the two warring sides?
So first of all, good morning and thank you for having me. I think that what Washington is hoping to achieve and how Qatar and Egypt are trying to frame this to both sides is, let's just get the first phase done. Hamas is demanding, as you said, an all-out ceasefire and IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. Israel is stating that it is going to eradicate Hamas, it is going to invade Rafah and Deir el-Balah and destroy Hamas. Both sides are presenting zero-sum approaches which will not lead to any truce, will not lead to any ceasefire. So what Qatar and Egypt are trying to do are trying to get both sides to sort of climb down from the trees they've climbed up and save face, and saying to Hamas, for example, okay, how about if you agree that we do the first phase and you can publicly say that you have a guarantee from us that the next phase of the ceasefire will be an ultimate IDF withdrawal. So you haven't given up on your terms, but you're just accepting that the first phase doesn't include them. And saying the same thing to Israel, saying, we're not saying that you have to stop the war, but how about if you just frame it in some way that lets you just get this 6-week truce going, and then maybe from there you can save face somehow, some other way. What the United States is hoping is that if a 6-week truce is called, that both sides will be tired of the fight. That after 6 weeks, they will not have the energy to go back to full-on fighting, and then they will be almost be forced by their own internal populations to then develop the second and third phase of the truce, which will lead to that ultimate ceasefire, which Hamas at least says it wants. That's at least the hope in the United States. That's why they want that first phase to just be achieved any way possible.
Right, Mr. Burstein, the United States of America is optimistic as of now. It says that it is still hopeful to conclude a ceasefire for hostage deal by the start of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Israel says that it has agreed to the proposals, but Hamas is not agreeing to the proposals offered on the table. Are you optimistic regarding truce before the Muslim holy month of Ramadan?
It is possible because right now the sticking points can be resolved. What's happening is the internal politics on both Israel and Hamas's side are really what's holding it up. The sides agreed to a broad framework. But then after the Paris summit, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu all of a sudden added another term. He said, but before any negotiations, he wants to know how many hostages are alive and how many are dead, which may be a reasonable request, but he did not make it before the Paris summit, only after. In turn, Hamas is saying, well, we agree to these terms A, B, and C, but our internal politics may actually stop us from carrying forth the deal between Yahya Sinwar on the one hand and Ismail Haniyeh on the other. So it really depends on the internal relationships in both camps regarding if a truce can be called. They can come to an agreement. The broad framework is something that they agree on. Both sides disagree on what's going to happen after, on if there's going to be a return to fire or if there's going to be a ceasefire. But the two sides do agree on what will be in the first 6 weeks. It's just about the internal politics. So right now, it's hard to say. If you asked me 5 days ago, I would have said, yes, I'm very optimistic. Hamas wants a ceasefire during Ramadan. It's good for Israel. It's good for Hamas. It's good for all sides. Right now, there's all kinds of different debates. Yahya Sinwar in Gaza, according to some reports, has decided that it's better for him if fighting continues during Ramadan because maybe that will make Palestinians in the West Bank rise up in arms, and that will deflect some of the fire away from Gaza. So right now, I'm less optimistic, but it's changing every day, honestly. Osama Hamdan today, the leader of Hamas in Lebanon, said something different. So it's changing every single day.
Right, Mr. Burstein, talk about the internal politics that you mentioned. How do you view Washington hosting Israeli War Cabinet member Benny Gantz, who is a political rival of Netanyahu? And we've seen that before Benny Gantz's visit to Washington, D.C., Netanyahu clearly said that Israel only has one prime minister.
Netanyahu is furious at Benny Gantz's trip to Washington. In the polls in Israel, if the government were to fall right now, Benny Gantz's party receives over 40 seats out of 120, and Netanyahu's party, the Likud, after the disaster of October 7th, receives 18 or less. So Netanyahu is very scared of Benny Gantz's growing power, and growing popularity in Israel. And this trip to Washington to Netanyahu is a huge threat. It's the United States also signaling we recognize that Benny Gantz may be the person to talk to. He may be the one who at some point, if the government in Israel falls, may be the one who can help us to deliver on what the United States wants to see in the region, this normalization with Saudi Arabia, possibly a Palestinian state. I think that's what Netanyahu is fearful of, and I think that's what Benny Gantz wanted to achieve. In turn, from the point of the United States, I think that them talking to Benny Gantz is just them trying to see who can help us in the Israeli government. The Israeli government, we spoke throughout the last year. We spoke about the Israeli government. It's a very hawkish right-wing government. And Benny Gantz is sort of a moderate voice. He's a voice of reason, and he's a very strong member in the war cabinet. And like I just said, he's very popular in Israel. So I think because of that, the United States is saying, you know what, wonderful. You want to come visit us. You want to talk to us. Let's see what we can get out of you. Can we convince you to let more humanitarian aid in? Can we convince you to delay an invasion to Rafah? Can we convince you A, B, and C? So I think for Benny Gantz in the United States, it's a win-win, and it's a loss for Netanyahu, which both those sides, Benny Gantz and the United States, are very happy that Netanyahu loses from this.
Right, Mr. Boostin, thank you so much for taking our time and joining us here on WION with your insights.